When Lacey was 20 years old, she worked as a delivery girl for a pretty popular pizzeria in her area. Initially, she worked the late morning to mid-afternoon shift, but when the guy who delivered the night shift ended up getting fired due to him losing his license because of a DUI, she was placed on the night shift instead. Lacey really didn't want this shift because you never know if people who order late at night actually want a pizza or if they have other intentions in mind. Unfortunately, her boss essentially told her if she wasn't willing to work the night shift, she was fired. Lacey wasn't exactly in a position to be out of work, so she reluctantly worked the shift. The first month went by without any issues. That was until she had to deliver a pizza to a house that just barely made it to their delivery radius. Lacey put the address in the GPS and the house was located in a pretty suburban part of the city. She arrived at about 11 p.m. The block was extremely quiet, decently lit, and mostly littered with modern townhouses. But the house she delivered to was a duplex. Lacey rings the doorbell and waits for about 30 seconds. No answer. She rings it again and waits for another 30 seconds. Still no answer. She's standing there getting pretty nervous that something's about to go down, but thankfully a man opens the door. He looked like he was in his late 40s. Lacey tells him his pizza's here and he just stands there, staring at her. She asked him if he was okay and he responded by saying, "Yeah, I'm fine, sorry. I got off work not too long ago and I'm zoning out a bit." He hands her the money and she hands him the pizza, and as she's making change, he says, "You're really beautiful, you know that?" Not really thinking too much into it, Lacey thanked him for the compliment and gave him his change. She walked back to her car and finished the remaining deliveries for the night. A few days later, Lacey gets a delivery order from the same place. She heads over there around the same time as before and rings the doorbell. He answered the door very excitedly and said, "Hey, it's you again. How are you?" Lacey told him she was tired and can't wait to go home, to which he chuckled and said, "I know that feeling pretty well." As he's counting his money, he asks what her name is. Being tired at this point and not really thinking, she stupidly tells him her name. As Lacey was making change, he asks if he could have her number as he'd love to hang out with someone as gorgeous as she is. Lacey's just standing there awkwardly for a few seconds before she said, "Sorry, I have a boyfriend." He gets upset and says, "Oh, okay. I see." They stand there in silence before she tells him to have a good night and walks back to her car. He says nothing and still stands at the doorway staring at Lacey until he finally went back inside once she started the car. There was a pretty creepy vibe from this guy, and she even brought it up to her co-workers and they also agreed it was creepy. Except for her boss, who overheard everything and claimed Lacey was making up stories to try to gain sympathy for having to take the night shift. A week later, there's an order from the same guy, and this is when it hits the fan. Lacey arrived at the house at around 10:30 p.m. As she's approaching the door, it quickly swings open to reveal the man, except this time he was wearing a suit. "Sorry if I scared you. I saw you out the window and figured I'd just open the door now so that you wouldn't have to ring the bell." Lacey was getting scared because there were no lights in the house, so he was sitting in the dark this entire time? And if so, why? He asked if she liked his suit, to which Lacey said yes. He then asks, "Would you like to go on a date with me tonight?" She once again tells him that she has a boyfriend, to which he chuckles and gets close to her and says, "There's no way a girl your age is in a serious relationship. If you go on a date with me, I'll show you how a real man treats a girl." He grabs the pizza box from her, throws it to the side, and grabs her by the arms. Lacey's officially losing her mind at this point and trying not to cry from the fear that was overwhelming her. She starts pleading with him, "Dude, please, I just want to go home. I don't want to go on a date." He just stares at her with the most sinister look and says, "I don't care, get inside now. We're gonna have a good time." He starts trying to pull Lacey into the house and she's resisting as much as she can. After a bit of struggling, he lets go of one of her arms and starts grabbing something out of his pocket, which she presumed was a knife. Lacey used her free arm to punch him as hard as she could in the stomach. She quickly runs to the car, and as she gets in, he chases after her and tries pulling Lacey out of the car, holding the knife in the other arm, and yells, "Why are you making this so difficult?" She grabs her soda bottle from the cup holder and throws it at him, luckily hitting his head, causing him to let go. She slams the door, and then all of a sudden he jumps right on the hood of the car and starts scratching and banging on the windshield. Lacey put the car in reverse and quickly backs out of the spot and reverses down the road with him desperately trying to hold on. He's banging on the hood, screaming screaming, "Stop the car!" She turns onto the next road as swiftly as possible, and luckily he falls off the hood. Lacey slammed the gas to get as far away as she could from that disgusting man. In her panicked state, she drove a couple blocks down the street and kept making turn after turn onto other side blocks as Lacey feared that she was being followed. Eventually, Lacey reached the red light and slammed on the brakes and just sat there at the intersection frozen from what just happened. She began crying and violently shaking. It dawned on her that she came so close to losing her life. Once the light turned green, she pulled over to the side and just sat there crying. Eventually, Lacey gets the energy to drive back to the pizzeria, and almost immediately after she walks in, her co-worker knew something was wrong. She practically broke down in front of him and explained everything that happened. Lacey's boss even began apologizing profusely for what had just happened and for putting her on a night shift. He took her into the office and handed her the phone to call the cops. They arrive at the store and Lacey gives them their statement, as well as taking pictures of any marks on herself as well as the scratches on the car from the encounter as evidence. Lacey drove home that night and collapsed on the bed and, strangely enough, managed to fall asleep. She quit her job the next day, and luckily a friend of hers managed to help her get a new job at a clothing store. As far as the cycle goes, 2 days later, Lacey received an update from the police. The entire duplex was owned by the guy's brother, who lived on the left side with his wife, and the man lived on the right side of the duplex. She learned that he had been in and out of jail constantly, at first for robberies and assaults, but later on it was for other crimes involving a minor. He had been released from jail about 5 months before this encounter. When they arrived at the house, he was long gone and his family had no idea where he ran off to. But the police insisted they would find him. And indeed, they did, albeit not alive. She spent the next 2 months in fear that he would find her and finish what he had in mind, but the police contacted Lacey and updated her on the case. Apparently, he fled to another city nearby and attempted to kidnap a teenager walking alone on the street. Luckily, someone was there at the right time and they were able to call the police, and the police caught him. He manages to flee and the police chase after him. He blew a red light near a busy boulevard and the van slammed right into the driver's side of his car. By some sort of miracle, the driver of the van only sustained minor injuries, while the psycho succumbed to his wounds long before the ambulance even arrived. Lacey thanked the officers for everything they did and for informing her, and she walked out of the station. Lacey walks down the street and is taking in everything she had just been told. She doesn't wish death upon anyone, but after hearing about him dying, there was a feeling of relief. She was relieved that he couldn't hurt anyone anymore and would never have to encounter him ever again. Who knows what would have happened to Lacey if he managed to pull her into the house that one delivery night.